Okay, so we're going to talk about how flavor is extracted from fruit. And so the main difference between a lot of wine styles is the level of extraction that you accomplish from the berries. So what I mean by that is almost all of the color is from the skins. So if you see the skin is very dark red and the pulp is clear. So if you can press really lightly, even on a really dark fruited cultivar, you can get, see that this is a little too ripe, but if it's a little less ripe, you're still getting just barely pink. And if you're to macerate this juice with these dark skins, you can extract all of the color and astringency from the skin. So in order to make a red wine, you have the juice in contact with skin for a prolonged time. So during fermentation, the yeast will break down the skins, release a lot of the anthocyanin and tannin, which gives color and texture to the wine. So a great example that most people are familiar with is the difference between white Zinfandel and red Zinfandel. So white Zinfandel is pink in color, and it's usually made from light extraction of the cultivar Zinfandel. And red Zinfandel is used, a red wine technique where you extract as much color and tannin from the skins. So if you lightly press the cluster, you get this kind of pink color. So that's the color you get from really light press. So in order to make rosé or a light pink fruity wine that has low astringency, this is how you do it. You lightly press it and you're just fermenting that juice. So now if you take the skins, and we'll try to do a quick version of this, and you macerate them well. So even just a short period of time, we've extracted quite a bit more. It's not a light pink anymore. It's more light red. And so you can make different styles of wine based upon the level of extraction. And so how this works is you can destem and crush the fruit and have a short period or a short window of skin contact. They like to call that cold soaking or short maceration. And that can give you light styles of wine that have some color. They're not really light. They might have a little bit more astringency, a little bit more bitterness, a little bit more mouthfeel. But based upon the level of extraction, you can change the style of the wine. So the second component, so we've just talked about the skins and the pulp so far. The seeds themselves have a lot of tannin, and they can have a lot of bitterness in them. So based upon how mature the seeds are, or how much tannin, how much bitterness is in the seeds, how much of that you extract will determine how much astringency the wine has. So red wine, inherently, there's going to be seeds in the fermenter, and as the alcohol increases, it breaks down the outside layer of the seed, and it starts to extract tannin and bitterness. So if the seeds are really ripe, it's thought that they're less bitter, as opposed to if the fruit gets picked early, the seeds tend to be more really dry and astringent and can be kind of bitter, so extraction you have to be careful with on seeds. So the other source of tannin is stems. So stems can be included in red wine or kind of orange wine style. Red wine, sometimes they'll leave stems, whether it's they're putting whole clusters in the fermenter or they're destemming and adding back stems. But stems can have quite a bit of astringency to them. So if a wine you're going for a fuller bodied red wine and the skin doesn't quite have enough tannin, which some cultivars they don't, you can add the rachis or the stem to the fermenter and extract some of that tannin. When I talk about tannin and astringency, it's this drying sensation on your palate. So most people that are not familiar with wine or the terminology included in wine, most people have had a popsicle before. And a popsicle most of the time has a wooden stick. And if you eat the popsicle and you chew on that stick long enough, it gets this kind of drying sensation in your mouth. What happens is there's tannin in the wood that was used to make the popsicle stick, and it's binding protein on your tongue, and that's causing a rough sensation in your mouth. So in the right proportion, that's really pleasing. In too heavy proportion or really high tannin, you can have really overtly drying and kind of off-putting wines. But without tannin, the wines can seem a little flat, a little flabby, less interesting. So just the right amount of extraction, whether it's from the skins or the stems, is what drives wine style. So you can really affect wine style based upon level of extraction. And that changes. It's more clear with red grapes because you can see the color much easier. With white cultivars, you have the same kind of thing happening. The more skin contact that you have, so whether you have a cold soak or you do some maceration before you press it, you can increase or decrease the amount of tannin and flavor compounds that you get from the skin. Some styles of white wine tend to be low phenolic, so that means low amount of extraction from the seeds and the skin, and those tend to be softer, and especially if you have grapes that have really high acid, it's this astringency and acid can clash or be off-putting. So white wines, they need higher acid to be more interesting, but if you get some of these tannins that are a little harsh, the wines can taste a little bitter or drying and a little bit off. So sometimes the lightest amount of extraction you get is whole cluster pressing. So we talked about whole cluster in the fermenter to extract tannin from the stems, but whole cluster press can be just that, in that as you press a berry, the juice that comes out starts from the inside, the very middle of the berry, and as you press harder and harder and harder, you start to get juice from closer to the skin. So when you lightly press berries, you're mostly getting very clear juice, very low astringency. It tends to be a little higher in sugar, a little higher in acid, and lower in pH. But as you press harder and harder and harder, you start to get more astringency. You pull a little bit more potassium from the skin, so the pH of the juice tends to be a little higher. Get a little less sugar. So it's this balance of understanding what wine style you're trying to achieve and what level of extraction that you're trying to achieve from processing the fruit. And this is really critical to driving wine style. So the winemaker, it's really important to determine ideal harvest fruit composition. But once you understand what those numbers are, you can really substantially affect the way the wine tastes based upon the level of extraction that you get. So you can make wildly different wines from the same exact fruit based upon how you extract those aroma compounds and astringency and bitterness from the skin.